I know. It's been a while since I reviewed a book. I've been concentrating on NaNoWriMo all month, as I'm sure many others have. You can check out all those updates here or linked in the box below. But this book needed to be reviewed. Taovan Awaken by S.J. Saunders is the first book in his Seasons of Light series. I thought it was great fun. It reminded me of The Eye of the World with Matrix elements. Just think, dodging bullets. Admittedly, I was in the mood for an epic fantasy, but it's still saying something when I had my heart set on rereading The Lord of the Rings, and this helped satisfy that craving. I, like I think everybody else does, kind of hold my breath when I start reading a self-published book because you just don't know what kind of quality you're going to get. But this is one of the good ones. I happen to be reading the PDF version, and the formatting looked and felt very professional, as does the story itself. The characters are great, even the villains. The main characters all show promising development, though at times I felt it was a little sudden and could have used more build-up. I think one of my favorite things is that the villain is extremely vain, and he takes great pains to make himself look regal and dramatic at all times. And people notice. Think Megamind, but not that silly. It's amusing, and it adds a nice sense of realism to all of the characters. The villain because it's his thing, and the others through their reactions. Saunders chose to tell the story from the perspectives of several different characters, which reminded me a lot of Brian Jacques' Redwall series, which, if you didn't know, almost completely lines this entire bottom shelf. What I found truly interesting is that he didn't tell the antagonist's side of the story from the perspective of the main antagonist himself. Instead, he chose to use a secondary villain. Through the entire story, we're watching the villain from the eyes of both the good and the bad, but never actually from the villain's perspective himself. I thought it was a very intriguing way to show him off because we grow to understand him as a character, but we never actually get into his head, so he feels very intimidating and foreign. It made me feel much more involved with the story, like I was inside it rather than outside looking in. There was something in the climax that kind of jerked me around. It seemed not totally unbelievable, but too sudden to be acceptable. Once you read through more, it eventually makes sense, but I found myself wishing that the transition had been focused on a little more so it didn't seem so... Wait, he did what? But like I said, it is resolved and by no means ruins the story. I feel compelled to warn you that there is a slight overuse and misuse of the semicolon because it is one of my pet peeves and I have mentioned this in reviews for many other books. However, this also compelled me to revisit the definition of a semicolon, and I now know why so many people misuse it. The dictionary's definition of a semicolon is quite misleading, so I cannot in good conscience blame Saunders for this misuse. And you can bet that a rant video on the subject is totally on the way. The narration I found quite entertaining. It has a playful lilt that I found quite refreshing with the heavy topic of bloodthirsty tyrants and revolutions. There aren't jokes being told in the narration by any means. It just feels lighthearted and often has an amusing way of describing things. For the most part, it also continually held my interest. Saunders also employs the use of flashbacks in telling the story. In the first part of the book, I felt these weighed on the long side with unnecessary detail, but they tighten up and become more focused the further you get into the story. I also really liked where the story ended, and am very intrigued to see what happens next. I'm giving Taovan Awaken by S.J. Saunders 4 stars, and I would recommend it to anyone who likes a good fantasy read. You can find links below where you can buy the book, and also to the author's Facebook page. And that's it today. Next month, keep an eye out for my new series of videos on revising and editing in the wake of NaNoWriMo. I hope to have a couple of reviews as well, but my main focus will be these advice videos for December. US viewers, I wish you a very happy Thanksgiving tomorrow, and everyone else, have a great Thursday.